Minister, the time for
early
answering the
intervention
question
compliance
has
activities.
expired. Senator Ludlam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Finance Minister, Senator Cormann, representing the Treasurer, who I believe at this time is still Mr Joe Hockey. Why do we hit a sore spot? Why has the government—
Order.
President, it's so rowdy.
Well, Senator Ludlam, don't invite that sort of rowdiness. Senator Ludlam, you have the call.
Thank you, President.
Order on my rights.
We did hit it.
Order
We
on my
have hit a
rights.
nerve, haven't we? Why has the government ruled out considering changes to negative gearing or capital gains tax concessions as part of its tax review? If the government is not persuaded by the costed proposal to reform negative gearing introduced by the Australian Greens, will it at least reconsider its opposition in the light of the views of the head of the Abbott Government's Financial Systems Inquiry, David Murray, or Justice Richard Edmonds, who believes Mr Hockey's tax review has, and I quote, turned septic? Senator Cormann, through you, President, in the face of the evidence, will you include consideration of these measures in your tax review, and if not, why not?
The Minister for Finance, representing the Treasurer, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank Senator Ludlam for his question, and I am pleased to confirm again that the government has got absolutely no plans to make any changes to negative gearing. And the reason is because this government understands about market economics. We understand that the price of anything is a function of supply and demand. And if you're going to reduce the supply of private rental properties, you will push up the cost of rents. You will reduce housing affordability for those Australians who are currently renting, which is of course the experience of the Hawke government, when even the then Treasurer Paul Keating, after having pressed ahead with a change in this space, had to pull back. And of course at various times various Labor politicians who tried to make a name for themselves sort of popped up and tried to suggest that they were going to make a change, like Mark Latham when he was the shadow assistant treasurer, pressed out and said he was going to make changes to negative gearing, and until he was called back by the then leader Simon Crean. And I noticed that there's now a view that perhaps the Labor Party wants to again go down into this negative gearing space. But when I was listening to Mr Shorten the other week, I was finding it very hard to understand what Mr Shorten was actually saying. Was he in favour of a change to negative gearing, or was he in favour of the status quo? Listening to his answer there in his press conference last week, I didn't have a clue what he was talking about.
Pause the clock. Senator Ludlam, a point of order.
Thank you, President. Careful examination of the Hansard will show that I didn't ask the Minister about the Labor Party's position. I asked about the government's position. Why are you even ruling out consideration of these messages?
Well, Senator Ludlam, there's no point of order. The Minister up front answered your question very succinctly, and the Minister is enhancing his answer, which he's entitled to do. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. What I would encourage Senator Ludlam to do, and what I would encourage the Labor Party to do, is have a bit of a read of the opinion piece by the former Kevin Rudd speechwriter in the Australian today, where he very succinctly pointed out that this proposition that somehow negative gearing is a tax break for the rich is false. I might just inform the Senate that the bulk of people with negatively geared investment properties are average income earners. 883,325 of the 1.26 million people, or 70% of those claiming the rebate, earn less than $80,000. Around 500,000.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering the question has expired. Senator Ludlam, a supplementary question.
Yes, I will. Thank you, President. Why have a number of government spokespeople, including the Treasurer, the Prime Minister and most recently the Finance Minister to this Senate, repeated the completely baseless myth that winding back negative gearing will increase rents? Will the Minister commit to revising Liberal Party talking points to ensure that the debate proceeds on the basis of facts rather than people simply making stuff up?
Order. Order on both sides. Both sides. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, it's not a baseless myth. It is actually the lived experience. I mean, look no further than the experience when the Hawke government, with Mr Keating as Treasurer, tried to do this, tried to intervene in the market this way. I mean, the basic proposition here is that we should stop people from being able to deduct the cost of generating income from their taxable income. I mean, that's what you're proposing. That is not a sensible way of running an economy. And let me just finish in providing the factual information that I was starting to provide to the Senate before. Around 500,000 Australians in the 32.5% tax bracket negatively gear. Now, these are the Australians earning between $37,001 and $80,000. Hardly rich Australians. Now, I understand that the left in Australia, that the Labor-Green alliance wants to run this class warfare sort of campaign, trying to say that this is an unfair and unreasonable tax break for the rich. Well, no, it isn't actually.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering the question has expired. A final supplementary, Senator Ludlam. Order on my right. Senator Heffernan.
Order in front of me.
Senator Heffernan. Order. Senator Ludlam.
Thanks, Mr President. I refer to Ipsos polling published this morning indicating 7 out of 10 Australians describe housing in our capital cities as unaffordable to prospective first home buyers, in direct contradiction to Mr Hockey's offensive free advice of a few days ago to just get a better job. Will the government commit to restoring the $500 million funding it tore out of housing affordability programs, including the National Rental Affordability Scheme, Capital Works for Homelessness Services, the First Home Savers Scheme, the National Housing Supply Council, Homelessness Australia, the Community Housing Federation and National
Thank you,
Shelter?
Senator Ludlam. The time for asking the question has expired. Senator
Thank you very much, Mr President. Obviously, the government is very concerned to ensure that housing is as affordable as possible, but we also understand the laws of the market. I mean, the truth is that if you want to make housing more affordable sustainably, you ensure you boost supply rather than boosting demand. If you boost demand in an overheated market, then you will push up the price of housing even further, which is of course one of the reasons why we will not take up the proposition that Senator Ludlam put forward to get rid of negative gearing. And might I just say that negative gearing is not a specific tax concession. The term negative gearing is a colloquial term for legitimate tax deductions for financing expenses associated with investments. The principle of allowing deductions for expenses incurred in the earning of assessable income is well established in our tax system. And incidentally, job classifications from the ATO show that the majority of people accessing negative gearing are teachers, nurses, clerical and emergency workers and salespeople. So the Greens can continue to run down this path where you'll be hurting Middle Australia.
Thank you, Minister.
rather than
the time
who
for
you think you'll
answering
target.
the question.